Hello, and welcome to 5-Minute Math. Today we are looking at area of a rectangle. This is 3.6c Readiness Practice, the advanced version. If you are interested in exploring the intermediate or proficient versions of 3.6c, or if we're looking at the Readiness Practice resources aligned with any other standard, you can find them by using the link in the video description. So we have Sarah here. She's making a quilt, and she wants to use 35 patch squares. Each of them are 1 by 1. We need to have 7 rows. How many square passes are going to be in each row? All right, so this is actually giving us something different. This is giving us a total. So I'm going to write this 35. I'm going to make a strip diagram just to help us visualize what's actually happening here. So I've got 35 total, and each square is going to be 1 by 1. So we're just looking at how many units it would take to get to the 35, and I need to have 7 rows. So if I can think of it like this, I'm going to break it up into 7 rows. I'll make each row a group and pretend those are all the same size. And the question is how much is going to be in each group? Well, once we look at it like that, hopefully we're thinking, okay, that's just 35 divided by 7. So that's going to equal 5. So we need 5 square patches. 5 square patches will be in each row. And let me draw an array to kind of show us what that looks like. So all we had was, and this is really what we were looking at. We were looking at, we had 7 rows. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a rectangle here. I'm going to pretend this is my quilt. Let me scoot it down a little bit. There we go. And I'm just going to draw 7 rows. And I don't know how many columns or how many are going to be in each row. That's the question, right? So if I add this top row, right, I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then if I extend that a little bit, I've got my 7 rows. So I need to get up to 35. Well, if I make a complete row right here, what we're going to see is I've got 7 down there. Then I make another complete row. And instead of putting a number in each one, I'm just going to create my total and put it at the bottom. All right, so that's going to be 21, and that's going to be 28. And what you could do is you can just keep adding 7s until you get up to that 35, and you see that this is going to get us our last set, right? That's going to get us our 35. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 groups of 7, and that's going to get us our 35. So there are many different ways that we could visualize this, but ultimately our answer is 5. There are 5 square patches in each row. All right, so for number 2, we need to draw 4 different arrays. They need to each have an area of 72 square inches. And we need to have 4 arrays that do not repeat factors. So, for example, and that's what that challenge is asking about. So probably the simplest array is going to be this, right? You're thinking what times what equals 72. So that's going to be 9, and that's going to be 8. So I'm going to draw a 9 by 8 array, and what the challenge says is let's not flip that and draw an 8 by 9 array. It's the same array, just rotated, because we're repeating factors. We just have it in a different orientation. So let's just not do that. All right, so if I draw an array like this, it's almost going to be a square. It's going to be slightly longer than it is tall. And so I'm going to have my 9 going side to side. So how to make 9? So I'm going to cut it into thirds. Then I'm going to cut each third into thirds because 3 times 3 makes 9, so that gets me 9 equal sections. So we can use our knowledge of fractions to help us try to draw equal groups. With eighths, well, we can cut it in half, cut each half in half. That's a fourth, and then cut each half of a half, or fourth, into half, because 2 times 2 times 2 makes 8. And that's what we're doing. So there we go. That's one array, and if we want to count, we can see, I'll just count at the end. I've got 9, I've got 18, I've got 27, I've got 36, 45, 54, 63, 72. All right, so what else can I do here? Well, there are different ways that I can get to 72, right? And so let's look at what happens if we take our 8 and we cut that in half. So what if we only did 4 rows? I'm going to end up making it look like 4 columns like this. How many rows would we need? Well, if I took half of my 8, I'm going to need to end up doubling the other factor. So I'm going to draw it like this. It's not going to be as proportional, so I'm just going to make it kind of tall and skinny. I'm going to need to make this 18. And I'll show you how I knew that in just a second. So I'm going to just draw this right here. Fourths. I'm going to do that same thing. I'm going to cut it in thirds. And then I'm going to cut each third in third. It's going to give me my ninths. Then in order to get my 18ths, I need to cut each of those into halves. Because 2 times 9 makes 18. And so rather than counting by 4s all the way down, let's just count by 18s, and I'll count across. So 18, 36, 54, 72. All right, and how that works is if you take half of one factor, I took half of 8 to make 4, you can double the other factor. I doubled 9 to get 18, and that works. All right, so you could take half of 6, or take half of 4 to get 2 and double the 18 to get 36. You could take half of that to get a 1 times 72. Let's be kind of long. Let's switch factors. All right, so let's think about 6s. How many 6s does it take to get up there? Well, 6 times 6 is 36, and then if I double that, that's going to get me 72. So I can think of 12 times 6, or 6 times 12. So let's do that right here. Let's think of a 6, and then I'm going to bring it all the way over here. We're going to make this by 12. So let's go ahead and put our numbers here. I'm going to put 9, I'm going to put 8, right? And so I want to do a 6 by 12. And how are we going to do that? Well, for 6, you're going to cut it in thirds. Then you're going to cut each third in half. Twelfths, you're going to do that same thing. Then you're going to cut each of those into halves. Right? So I'm going to cut each, or you could do like this. You can do fourths. There's a few different ways to get to twelfths. And then you cut each fourth into thirds, because 4 times 3 makes 12. All right, so here we go. I've got an array. I've got 12 in each row, and I've got 6 rows of that. So let's count by 12s. 12, 24, 36, 48, 60, and then there's my 72, right? And then we need one more that has a different set of factors, right? So we've done 9 times 8, we've done 18 times 4. We've also done 6 times 12. Right, so we could do if we double in half, we could do a 3 times 24. That could work. And let's look at that. What would that look like? So if I wanted to do 3, I have to make it very small and very long. And it's getting kind of smaller because I made my first array kind of large and I used up a lot of room. So I want to do a 3 times 24. 3 times 24, and that's going to equal 72. Now, my thirds are going to be pretty easy, like this. So I did the same doubling and halving. I took half a 6, so I doubled the 12 to get, that's how I got that. So let's get to 12ths and then cut each of those in half. So I'm going to cut each into fourths, cut each fourth into thirds. 4 times 3 makes 12. And then cut each of those 12ths into half, because 12 times 2 makes 24. And then we will simply write, I've got sets of 12, or sets of 24, excuse me. 24, 48, 72. So those are the arrays I chose. There are some different arrays out there that you might choose. So we will say that your arrays may vary, but we're looking for 4 different sets of factors that will all equal 72, and an array to match each. All right, our third question is asking about a farmer planting, it looks like 2 different fields, a field with corn and a field with wheat. Each field is going to have a 1 by 1 meter square. Whenever you see anything like that that says the unit is going to be a 1 by 1, let you know we're dealing with area. So the cornfield is going to have 8 rows with 8 squares in each row. So let's draw that. That's basically going to be a giant square, right? So let's draw a giant square. This is my cornfield, and it says it's going to be an 8 by 8. So let's do this. We're going to cut it in half, cut each half in half to get fourths, cut each fourth in half to get eighths, because 2 times 2 times 2 makes 8. Then we'll do this, same thing. Half, cut each half in half, cut the half of the half in half, or fourth in half. Then I've got my 8, 16, 24, 32, 40, 48, 50, 6, 64. That's my cornfield. We're good with that. The wheat field is going to have 2 rows with 16 spaces in each row. All right, so I'm going to draw that underneath. Wheat. It's going to be very kind of skinny and long. And so let's get that, let's put that underneath just so it's a little bit clearer. So what does it say? Just 2 rows? 2 rows with 16 in each. It's a 2 by 16. So the rows are easy. To get the 16, we're going to cut it into eighths and then cut each eighth in half, because 8 times 2 is 16. So how do we get eighths? Well, we're going to do half, fourth, eighths, and then sixteenths. Now, what do I have there? Well, I've got 16, and then I've got 32. So now I've got my corn, I've got my wheat. Look what it asks. If the farmer, if she wanted to plant the same number of wheat seeds as corn seeds, how many more rows of wheat would she need to plant? Well, look, I've got 64 corn and I've got 32 wheat. So how many more does she need? Well, 64 minus 32 is 32. She needs 32 more seeds, but the seeds come in rows of 16. So 32 divided by the rows of 16 equals 2 more rows. And you probably saw that if you just think, well, if I need 32 more and I've already got 32, I can just double what I already have. So let's do that. I'm going to erase this wheat because that's kind of sitting in the way. I want to draw it down. I'll put it up there. And I'll do it in a different color. Do it in this orange. So if I just take this and extend it down, and then extend it over, then really what I need to do is I need to make that in 2 more rows, then extend each of these columns down. What I'm going to get is I'm going to get 2 more rows of 16, and that's going to get me to the same number as what I had of the corn. So another 16 is going to be 48. Another 16 is going to be 64, which gets me to what the corn has. So she needs 2 more rows in order to have the same number of corn seeds and wheat seeds. If you are interested in looking at the 3.6C readiness practice for the intermediate or proficient versions, or for exploring the readiness practice resources aligned with any other standard, you can find them by using the link in the video description.